Clark lob it up. Kelsey Mitchell wide open and knocks down a triple. Wilson, mid-range, where she's 2 for 2.
Kelsey Mitchell has to be...
The Aces coach thought he had the perfect plan to stop Caitlin Clark. He threw everything at her. Full court pressure, physical defense, you name it. For 3 quarters, it looked like it was working. Clark had 0 points in the first half, but then something crazy happened. Clark erupted for 18 points in the second half, and suddenly the Aces were in trouble. How did it all go down? Let's talk about that Aces strategy. They came out aggressive, like really aggressive, full court pressure from the start, and they weren't afraid to get physical with Clark. You know what's wild? It actually worked at first. Clark couldn't score. 0 points in the first half. That's insane for a player like her. The Aces thought they had it all figured out. Clark struggling to score? Check. Keeping her off balance? Check. But here's the thing. Basketball isn't just about stopping one player. And Clark? She's not just any player. She was about to show everyone why. Alright, let's talk about Clark's first half. You know how the Aces came out swinging with that aggressive defense? Well, it looked like it was working. Clark's shooting stats were brutal, 0 for 5 from the field, and she even missed both her free throws. That's rough for any player, let alone a superstar like Clark. Before we continue, I'd like to ask for a quick favor. If you're enjoying this content, please take a moment to like the videos and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of our viewers watch without subscribing, and while it's free for you, it makes a world of difference to us. Have you hit that subscribe button? Awesome. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get back to the video. But here's the kicker. Even without scoring, Clark was silently orchestrating Indiana's offense. How did she manage to stay so influential without a single point? It's like she flipped a switch and said, "Fine, you want to stop me from scoring? Watch this." Clark wasn't just standing around while her shots weren't falling. Nope.
This play second fastest, Indiana third fastest, and Lexi Hull, the league's Wilson's finding some space from the mid-range and connecting. 3 for 3 from the mid-range.
She was busy setting up her teammates like a master puppeteer. And get this, she was the only starter with a non-negative plus-minus rating. That's insane. It's like she found a way to control the game without even putting the ball in the hoop. But Clark wasn't the only one keeping Indiana in the fight. Kelsey Mitchell stepped up big time. While Clark was struggling to score, Mitchell was out there lighting it up. She kept the fever competitive, making sure the Aces couldn't just focus all their energy on shutting down Clark. You know what's wild? The Aces probably thought they had this in the bag. Clark with 0 points at halftime? That's usually a recipe for disaster for Indiana, but they didn't count on Clark's ability to impact the game in other ways. She was like a chess master, moving her pieces around the board, setting up plays, and keeping her team in striking distance.
For the Aces this year. As Clark got around Stokes, gets to the rim, lays it in, and a foul. Here's Asia Wilson knocking down her first look.
It's crazy to think about. Most players would be rattled if they couldn't score for an entire half, but Clark, she just switched gears. She became a facilitator, a floor general, doing whatever it took to keep her team in the game. That's the mark of a true superstar. When plan A isn't working, they find a plan B, C, and D. So there we were heading into halftime. The Aces thinking they've got Clark figured out. Indiana staying competitive despite their star player not scoring a single point. And Clark, she's probably in the locker room, gears turning in her head, ready to come out and show everyone why she's one of the best in the game. You know how they say it's not about how you start, but how you finish? Well, Clark was about to put on a masterclass in second half comebacks. The Aces thought they had her number, but Clark was just getting warmed up. As the second half kicked off, it was like someone flipped a switch. Suddenly, we're watching a whole different game. Clark, who had been held scoreless in the first half, came out with a vengeance. It was like she'd been saving up all her energy, and now she was ready to unleash it. Clark started finding her rhythm, and boy, was it something to see. She was weaving through defenders like they were standing still. Her quickness was on full display, and even the Aces' best defenders were struggling to keep up. There was this one play where she managed to beat Aja Wilson to the basket. Aja Wilson, that's no small feat, folks. But it wasn't just about her scoring. Clark was controlling the tempo of the entire game. She was dictating the pace, deciding when to push and when to slow things down. It was like watching a conductor lead an orchestra, except this orchestra was the Indiana Fever, and Clark was making them sound like $1,000,000. The Aces' defensive strategy, it was falling apart at the seams. All that work they'd put in during the first half to contain Clark was going up in smoke. She wasn't just scoring, she was running the show. Every possession, every play, it all ran through her. And the Aces, they were scrambling to adjust. Clark's resilience was on full display. After that tough first half, some players might have gotten discouraged. Not Clark. She came out swinging, adapting her game to whatever the aces threw at her. It was a testament to her mental toughness and her ability to perform under pressure. By the time the dust settled, Clark had racked up 18 points in the second half. That's right, from 0 to 18. Talk about a turnaround. She was making shots, setting up her teammates, and generally causing havoc for the Aces' defense. It was like watching a completely different player from the first half. The momentum had shifted dramatically. The Aces, who thought they had the perfect plan to stop Clark, were now on their heels. They were reacting to her every move, instead of dictating the pace like they had in the first half. It was a complete reversal, and it all started with Clark finding her groove. So, did the Aces' plan backfire? Well, yes and no. Here's why. With Clark on fire, you'd think the Aces were done for, but here's the kicker. Sometimes, letting a star shine can set you up for an even bigger win. How? Well, that's where things get really interesting. The Clark's second half explosion nearly cost the Aces the game. She was on a roll, scoring 18 points and making the Aces' defense look like Swiss cheese. It was like watching a completely different player from the first half. The Aces' carefully crafted strategy was crumbling before their eyes. But here's the thing about basketball. It's not just about one player. While Clark was doing her thing, the rest of the Fever team kind of took a back seat. It's like they were all watching the Caitlin Clark show, forgetting they were supposed to be part of it too. And that's where the Aces found their opening. They realized they couldn't stop Clark, so they focused on shutting down everyone else. It was a risky move, but it paid off big time. Enter Chelsea Gray. When the Aces' defensive strategy started falling apart, Gray stepped up like a boss. She became the Aces' secret weapon, matching Clark point for point. It was like watching two heavyweight boxers trading blows, except with basketballs instead of gloves. Gray's performance was clutch. She kept the Aces in the game when it looked like Clark was going to run away with it. It just goes to show that in basketball, you always need a plan B, and sometimes plan B turns out to be even better than plan A. This game was like a masterclass in basketball strategy. It showed us how important it is to be able to change your game plan on the fly. The Aces thought they had it all figured out in the first half, but when Clark started cooking, they had to switch things up fast. And let's talk about the dangers of letting a star player like Clark dictate the tempo. When she got hot, it was like the whole game revolved around her. That's a double-edged sword though. Sure, Clark was scoring, but it also made the Fever's offense predictable. The Aces used that to their advantage. You know what's crazy about basketball? How quickly things can change. 1 minute, the Aces are in control. The next, Clark's on fire, and it looks like game over. Then boom, the Aces adjust. Gray steps up and suddenly they're back in it. It's like a roller coaster, but with more dunks and three-pointers. This game reminded everyone why adaptability is key in basketball. The Aces could have panicked when their initial strategy failed, but instead, they rolled with the punches. They saw what was working for Clark and found a way to work around it.